Well, good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to have you in with us. Welcome to Community Conversations. I am your host and facilitator, Orlando Williams. I am the Chief Executive and Equity Officer of Motus Recruiting and Motus Technology. And we are pleased to partner with the Portland Trailblazers to bring you this content and the opportunity to have real discussions about our community in an effort to move us all forward together. And this morning, I have the distinct pleasure and honor to have with me Mr. Elliott Hill, former president of Nike. All of you know the swoosh, the brand. But Elliott, it is a pleasure, my friend. Thank you for joining us this morning. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. I appreciate the invitation. It's good to be here with you, Orlando. You're always so gracious when we're together, and I enjoy our time together. And I appreciate you inviting me to be here, and looking forward to the conversation.
Awesome, awesome. So today we're going to talk lessons from the top, and there's a journey in that title. So we'll talk a little bit about the journey as well. But let me introduce you to those who don't know you. Many do, and many know you affectionately as E. Right. So I think I'm just going to refer to you as E today. Is that okay?
That's no problem. Hey, even
right.
My nephews call me Unc E, so it's all good.
All right. Good stuff. Good stuff. Well, so that'll be fun. So let me introduce you to some of the individuals who may not know you who are on our call this morning. So I'm just going to share a little bit about your background. So as we said, you recently retired from Nike after a very successful 32-year career, and you've joined BDT Capital as a senior advisor. You have board experience in global strategy, brand building, leadership development, consumer behavior, and data, retail, and digital. Most recently, Elliott has served as president of consumer and marketplace at Nike and oversight across four geographies: North America, Europe, Middle East, and Africa, Greater China, and Asia, Pacific Latin America as well. He was also entrusted with the leadership of Nike's global sales organization, marketing team, and the direct-to-consumer organization. As a part of his role, Elliott was also responsible for the Jordan brand business. Yeah, I like that. I got my 11 still.
That was fun.
Yeah, good stuff.
Which color of the 11s do you have, Orlando?
I got the black and red colorway.
Okay, so you're old school traditionalist, right?
That's right. That's right. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Well, either that or a Trailblazer fan, right?
Right. Yeah, well, I can be both. I'll take both.
All right.
Yeah. And in addition to that growth, one of the things, Elliott, that I've known about you is that you're really connected to the community. And as an active member of the community, you've worked across charitable contribution or organizations and associations. You help raise funds, awareness for causes. And one of those awards that you've received was you were honored by Nike with a Community Leadership Award, which is given to individuals who have made an outstanding contribution to their community, which is a phenomenal award. We'll talk about that. And then also, you were honored by the All-State Sugar Bowl and the National Football Foundation that recognized you with their Distinguished American Award. And might I add, that is such a distinguished award that past recipients include Bob Hope, was a past recipient of the American Award, and Vince Lombardi. I mean, you're in rare company, E. You've done some great things in supporting your community, so that's phenomenal. That's some great stuff.
And I was an average football player, so go figure.
Well, that's good. I think you definitely stood out and have been a unique leader. So let's start by allowing individuals to hear a little bit of your story, if you don't mind, sharing a little bit of your background and where you grew up, and then your connection to Oregon, how that transition happened.
Sure. I'll try not to bore everyone with my journey. I'll try to, I'm from Austin, Texas, which is where I am calling in from today. I was born and raised here. I left when I was 18, and I never came back to live. Obviously came to visit. And then as I transitioned into this next chapter of my life, it made sense to move back here. And I'll tell you this, it feels good to be home. I still have wonderful friends that I've kept in touch with over the years. And again, it feels good. really quickly, high level, raised by a single mother. Folks got divorced when I was young, 3.5, and my sister was 5. I don't know how detailed you want me to get here, but folks got
Whatever
divorced.
You're comfortable with.
Well, I had an interesting background. My father, my folks got divorced because my father was gay, and I had a relationship with him, which I think as I look back on it, being raised by a single mother, I think I learned loyalty, dedication, commitment, hard work out of her. She never remarried. She said she didn't have time to remarry. And then I learned, I think, about empathy from my father, that it's okay to be different and to make sure that you see people for who they are. And so did that, that's my early upbringing. I was raised in a very blue collar working class neighborhood that loved sports. And I think that instilled sports in me, the passion that I have for it. And I played sports, every sport you could think of, from the morning to night, like a lot of people our age did. And I wasn't good enough to play in college. So I went to school as an athletic trainer. That's how I worked my way through college. I got a scholarship to do that. Worked for the Cowboys for 1.5 years, went to grad school, wrote a paper on Nike, and in a marketing class, fell in love with the company. And I met a gentleman and he hired me. And so that was my entry sort of, from high school to college to Nike. And I had a 32-year career there, and it was an amazing career, and I'm incredibly grateful and thankful for it. So a little bit about me.
Well, that is phenomenal. Thank you for sharing. And I appreciate you also sharing. That's one of the things, E, that I really like about you. I haven't met very many leaders who are willing to be vulnerable and open. And I think it helps people grow. So I want to make sure that I affirm that and tell you that I think we really appreciate that about you. So had you visited Oregon? Had you been in the area before you accepted the job at Nike?
No, and I was hired actually. I was living in Ohio. And by the way, I should have said this really quickly from a personal perspective. A wife of 27, almost 28 years, my best friend and partner. I think it comes back to loyalty. We talked about that earlier. And then 2 children, a daughter that's almost 25, lives here in Austin, and then a son who's a junior, at USC. So about Oregon, so I got hired. I was living in Ohio. I get a phone call and said, "You want to work for Nike?" I said, "Yes, I've been bothering you for 6 months. Of course I want to work for Nike." And this was on a Friday. They said, "Can you be here on Monday?" I said, "Yes." "Where's here?" They said, "Memphis, Tennessee." "I'll be there." So you remember the days when you could pack everything you owned in your car, and we took off. And by the way, for those of you that are on the call here that are not young enough or old enough to remember this, we didn't have these with Google Maps. I literally so Memphis, Tennessee is where I started, and quickly worked my way through the sales organization. They moved me to Dallas. I had come to Oregon once or twice for a sales meeting, and that was the extent of my exposure to the state and the city of Portland. And what happened about 2.5 years into my career, I get a phone call. "We think you might be a good manager." And I was like, I don't know about moving to Oregon, because I was real happy in Texas, where I'm from. And I knew everyone up in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. But anyway, net, I took a chance and I moved up to Oregon, not knowing a lot about Portland and the city. And that was in October of '90. And I think it's less about me, Orlando, and I think it's more maybe of the message to those that are on the call is that sometimes we got to take chances, right?
Yeah.
And whether it was the job that I took a chance on, the city of Portland, the state of Oregon, I knew Nike was the place that I wanted to be, and I wanted to grow and develop. And I quickly understood, in order to grow and develop, I had to move to Portland. And it came down to, did I love living in Texas more than I love Nike? And the answer was no. I loved Nike more. And so that was the jump to Portland. Why Portland and why Oregon was because of that.
I appreciate you sharing that, because there are some times where fear can stifle us from making the right choices and making the right moves in our careers. Sure. And if you do that kind of that cognitive analysis, it'll bring you to a place where you really decide on what's important to you and what you value. And speaking to that, E, we are right now in a time where fear and trepidation and unwillingness to really kind of take risks because of COVID, and we've got social unrest, and if you've been in Oregon any amount of time, you've dealt with forest fires lately. There's a lot happening that's a distraction. So how would you, or well, one, how are you doing in managing COVID and isolation? And then, what kind of words or thoughts around individuals who might be contemplating making a change or doing something that would help them move forward, but are a little concerned because of the environment that they're living in today?
How am I doing? I'll say this, it's been an interesting transition. So for those of you on the call that don't know, I retired officially June 1 of this, just, a couple months ago. So after 32 years, so it was tough for me because I wasn't able to say goodbye to people that I wanted to say goodbye to, because we were all work from home and spread out. And so I'd say I spent about 3 or 4 days feeling sorry for myself. And then at some point you got to go. It is what it is for everyone, not just for me. You can't personalize it. So I think that's the key point, is sometimes you can't personalize things, that you got to step up above yourself and look around and realize that when it's all said and done, my family and I, we've got it pretty damn good. And so you're not going to hear me whine or complain. Do I like where we are as a country? Absolutely not. Whether it's COVID, whether it's social unrest, whether it's climate change, do I like it? No. But I also understand that I have to do my part, and I'm going to try to be positive and give energy to those around me. So I think I've handled the transition well. Like everybody, I have my ups and downs and my moments when I'm over this. Let's move forward. I'm hopeful that next week we're gonna, and I guess I should be careful here getting into politics, but I'm hopeful we have some change, and see if we can start healing and start to get this country back to the middle. So the second part of your question was, what do you say to people out there? Is, I'm always a really thoughtful person when it comes to making a huge decision around my life, and making a move, whether it's a physical move to another city, whether it's a move to another company, whether it's a move to maybe even taking another job. I'm thoughtful about it, maybe, too logical. I sit down and I, like most people, and you weigh the pros and the cons. And then I would say that I have skewed probably to, even though sometimes the cons might outweigh the decision to go, I've said yes because I like the newness and freshness, and I'm a very curious person. And so I've often said yes just because of that, just because I like going to meet new people, to experience new things, to learn new things. And I think that's helped keep me fresh and alive as a human being and as a leader. And so I guess my message to those, to answer your question, is be thoughtful, logical about the decision, but challenge yourself to get out of your comfort zone and to be curious. And I think being curious leads us to greater and greater things as a human being and as a teammate, and ultimately as a leader.
I have found that in my conversations with executives and individuals who have accomplished a lot, that there have been some common denominators, that being a lifelong learner and being curious has been one of those areas where individuals feel like there's always something new to learn, and that there's an elasticity that is required for you to continue to build and grow new things. So are you at a place right now that you're still learning? Are there new things that you're doing right now? I know there are. So maybe share some of the new things that you're doing. I know that you're working in a different capacity as well.
Yeah, I am. So I part of making the move was I was ready for a change from a work perspective. And so again, for those of you on the call, as Orlando said, I retired after 32 years from Nike. And part of it was just time. And people tell you, hey, you'll know when you know. I knew that it was time, not only for me personally, but also for the company, a new set of eyes, a new perspective, allow those behind me to grow and develop. And so it was good for the company. It was good for me. and I am learning every single day. I joined, as you pointed out, BDT Capital, which is a merchant bank out of Chicago. They invest in companies, and that's a whole new world for me, which was intriguing, and I wanted to learn about it. And they put me on 2 boards of 2 of their companies, and I would say that every day is a learning moment, to the point where I was sitting in on a business review with a company that they own. And I texted the CFO. I said, can I schedule a one-on-one with you just so I can ask him questions? And I did. I scheduled and again, you talk about being vulnerable. I'm this quote senior advisor. I'm the guy that's on the call, supposed to be giving them advice. And there was stuff I didn't understand. And I was texting him, and we scheduled a 1-hour call, and I asked him questions, and I learned from him. And so again, I think it's less about me. It's, again, those of you on the call, you know, always challenge yourself and push yourself to continue to learn, grow, develop. And then, of course, I won't bore you with it, but I got some personal things too that I'm learning and maybe not just learning, but getting better. I like my personal fitness and you know, my relationship with my family, time with them. So it's been a real blessing, this transition has. So the start of it is going really well. So
awesome.
Thank you.
Awesome. Well, I know a few of those things, but I'm not going to ask you about them now. I'm going to wait until a little bit later to ask you about them. So it's some fun stuff for sure. But I also know that you probably tried to retire a few other times from Nike as well, and those didn't go as well as this one has, right? They pulled you back in.
Yeah, no, you know what, I think I did get pulled back in, and I'm glad I stayed. This was now it'd be 4 years ago, and you know, I don't think the culture was where we wanted it to be, and I was personally struggling, you know, where the company was headed, and made a decision to retire. And then ultimately, Mark Parker asked me to stay, which I'm glad I did. I'm glad he asked me first, and then I'm glad I stayed, because I think over the last 2.5, 3 years, we were able to flip the culture, and not just because the culture's strong and it's resilient, and it's not just about the culture. We started conversations with people, real conversations about real issues that needed to be addressed within the company, and we talked about them openly, and like every good family does. And so I think we've made progress. I don't think you're ever going to hit perfection in the business world, but I'm glad I stayed. But this time was the right time. And again, I said it earlier, I'll say it again. It was not only the right time personally, but it was the right time professionally. You know, John was coming in, John Donahue's the new CEO. Had a great relationship with him when he was on the board in the first 6 months or so that I worked with him. But there were people behind me that were ready to step up and grow. And I remember me, 10 years ago, looking up going, gosh, I wonder if I'm ever going to punch through, because people were in the roles. And so when it lines up where personally I'm ready, and then B, there's transition going on within the company, and then C, there's people behind me that are ready, that's when I knew it was time. And the conversation went incredibly smoothly. And we worked out a great transition and an announcement around Heidi O'Neill, who ultimately took the role that I was doing. So a real nice, smooth transition. And again, I think it ended up being a win-win-win for everybody involved. So, and again, I think the point is less about me and those on the call. Is anytime that you're making a big transition, is to, again, be really thoughtful about that transition and have the conversations, the real conversations. And I think ultimately you end up in the right space.
When I think about transitions like that, and you're preparing the way for those, and you mentioned you were looking up and wondering how you were going to punch through, and you're also from that perspective and that vantage point, you can look at those other individuals who are seeking an opportunity, who really want to take a hold of the things that they've prepared for. How do you, as the leader who is exiting, kind of lay the groundwork and prepare the individuals who are coming before you and help them transition successfully? Are there certain things that you do to kind of create that succession plan so that they can be successful in their new role?
Yeah. So what I would say before I dive into the individual, just up above it, I think great corporations and organizations, they don't have to be a corporation, but organizations, and you know this extremely well from where you sit,
Yeah.
those that have a very thoughtful succession planning process in place are the ones that I think can sustain excellence and success over a period of time. And I would say that Nike does a nice job of running a process around succession planning, being thoughtful around who's on the bench for all of the big senior roles, and then down into the organization, and then holding the leaders accountable for a development plan for those individuals. And so I was fortunate, again, it's just something I enjoy doing. So it came naturally for me. But what I would say, again, for those on the call, is that we have a responsibility to be thoughtful about those that are below us and what's their trajectory upwardly, and to have those conversations with them. And more importantly than that, commit to helping grow and develop those individuals. And so, again, Heidi as my replacement wasn't a surprise. It was something that had been planned. We had explicit conversations. And then when it became public in February, the two of us worked really nicely and seamlessly to make sure that there was a smooth transition between the two of us. And again, I think it was very respectful, thoughtful transition. So again, I think point for everybody here, our responsibility as leaders is to have a plan for the roles that we're responsible for, the individuals, and not only in terms of a plan, but to help grow and develop them. So, and again, I think it goes back to just something that it's part of being a leader. It's one of our responsibilities is that personal development piece.
There's a lot of leaders that can learn from what you just described without question. I know that you mentioned it's something that you've done, and I know personally that you've taken the initiatives to go even beyond what might be orchestrated or policy for an organization, to take a personal interest in how individuals develop and grow. And so I want to ask you, in that framework, how do you also weave equity into that, where you're mentoring or talking to or working with individuals with their careers, and then also influencing equity in those types of decisions where you're bringing in maybe different people of color, people from the BIPOC community. And I know that's been something that you've been a part of throughout your career. So is that something that you prescribe, or is it something that you've just done on your own?
It's a great question. I'd like to sit here and say I did it on my own. I do think I've always been, again, because of how I was raised, where I was raised, I think I've always had empathy for those around me, regardless of, color or sexual orientation or religion. So I think I've always had that empathy, but I wouldn't go so far as to say, hey, it's just because I'm a great guy, I figured this out. There's no question that being a part of Nike in the structure that we had in place helped me and challenged me and helped me grow and develop. So I'll start there. I think that the second part of that is, at some point we realize, as you become in you're placed in leadership positions, you have a responsibility because someone helped pull us through, right? And so I took it seriously that we were trying to pull, as diverse of talent as we could possibly pull through the organization and be those advocates for those individuals. And again, did it come naturally? Yeah. And I'm thankful because like I said, I was always instilled as a young age around this idea of empathy. But I also am thankful to Nike for giving me the structure and the processes and the moments to have those conversations. So, but anyway, I think the point for those on the call, there's 2 points. One, as you're moving up through the organization, make sure you have the advocates, those individuals that are in the room that are going to help pull you through the organization is critical. And when you do get into leadership positions, don't forget how you got there. Someone pulled you through, so pay it forward. And I think those are the two key points in this conversation is know who your advocates are, who's in the room when decisions are being made, and what are they saying about you and why. Have you earned their respect in those words? And then number two, when you get in those roles where you are making decisions about individuals' careers, we have a responsibility to pay it forward. And I think that is the message, hopefully, for all of those that are on the call.
Well, I don't know if you've planned a book in your future, but that sounded like a few titles of authorship from my perspective. Those are invaluable, E. So thank you for sharing.
You have if you find me a ghost author, I might do it. I'd even pay him. It's interesting we sit here, not that it's irrelevant to this conversation, but one of the things that I think I would struggle with is sitting down to actually write. I don't mind talking. I don't mind telling stories and sharing thoughts and perspectives. But if I had to sit down in front of it and type, I don't think I could do it. So you're gonna have to find me a ghost author. All right.
All right. Fair enough. Well, that is what I do, by the way. I do recruit, so I'm pretty sure we can work through that.
All right.
So let's pivot a little bit and talk about your community involvement. We talked earlier about your community award from Nike, your American award from the National Football Foundation. Those are things that you don't just stumble into. There has to be some intentionality that goes into that kind of award and that kind of recognition. But I know you don't go into it seeking the recognition. It's just a part of you. But how did that become so important to you to be so connected with the community?
Again, I think it goes back to what I just talked, pay it forward, right? I could tell you right now, and I had lunch with him on Tuesday. My mom taught even summer school. So from the time I was a little kid, I hung out at a Dottie Jordan Park in Austin, Texas, this little playground, and it had a little small rec center. Didn't have a gym, but it had a little rec center. And I hung out there from the time I could ride a bike to I graduated from high school. And there was a guy by the name of Robert Armstead who became sort of his job was to look over me, but he became a mentor. And when I would start to go this way, he'd pull me in. And so and he ultimately gave me my first job, and I worked for the Austin Parks and Recreation Department for 3 years. And what I learned through that, and also participating in sports, is the importance of mentorship, I guess is the point there. And mentorship comes in many forms. It could be one-on-one mentorship. It could be business mentorship. It could be through a coach athlete relationship. And I realized that Robert helped shape who I became as an individual, and I realized the importance of mentorship. And so through that idea and that concept of mentorship, that's where I and my wife and my family, frankly, have decided that's where we will spend time in the community, is trying to help individuals. And I've been involved with Big Brothers Big Sisters. I ended up ultimately chairing the board in Portland, and I've coached a bunch of different teams throughout my younger years with kids, and so mentorship, I guess, is the one common denominator there. The importance it is to me, and doing it now as we move forward, doing some mentorship with some young entrepreneurs, and doing it with through the form of education. We're helping out with some kids that with not only financial rewards, but also with mentorship. So key there is mentorship, I guess.
And you've set up a scholarship or two, right? Yeah. That's part of that for you.
We have. So we've set up here in Austin in my mother's name. Education was incredibly important to her. And so we are giving money away to students to go in need. So it's need-based. We have targeted POC and need-based, and to go to TCU, which is my alma mater. And it is not only, again, the financial component of it, but if the student chooses, we are having offering mentorship to them. And that could be very informal in the form of phone calls, texts, formal dinners, those sort of things. But again, I look back on the transit. I had no business going to school at TCU financially, and I look back on it if I had someone help and teach and coach me, I think it would have gone a lot smoother. And that's all we're trying to do. So that makes sense. And then we're working on some things. It's a little too early to tell, but we want to do some things in Portland with my wife, and she's from Portland, and so we're doing some things there. She was intimately involved in North Portland with St. Andrew Nativity, so we're working through that.
Great school. I've spoken there a few times.
It's a phenomenal school, and you know, I think the individuals that come out of that program, I think that is, when you meet those individuals, that's their report card right there.
Yes.
You change people's lives, and how often can you say that? So
yeah, agreed. Well, you've talked about mentorship, and you dropped the nugget that you have coached in the past, and if I'm not mistaken, you've coached football and basketball, and we've talked a little sports in the past, you know, as far as we didn't compare notes as far as career paths and all that kind of stuff, but we talked about it. I'm really curious if you could share, what do you tell a young person when you're coaching? When you're mentoring? What are kind of some of the messages that you're conveying to them that you want to make sure that they take away from an encounter with you or for a period of time with you?
I think character and integrity would be at the top of the list. You know, I think you can't have loyalty or trustworthiness if you don't have character and integrity. And by the way, consistent would be another word. You got to consistently have character and integrity. You know, you can't have it sometimes. You got to have it always. So that'd be the first message. I think humility would be another one. We don't get to where we get on our own. And so I think humility would be another one. I think having a plan or a vision of where you want to go is critically important. Again, doesn't just mean in life or a job. It could be inside of that season or that game. You know, you don't just go play a game. You got to go into the game with already a mindset of how you want to perform. And so I think having a plan, it would be probably the third thing that I would say about that. And then curiosity, which we already talked about. And then finally, work ethic. You know, I think I would throw that in as well. And you know, if you can master some of those, and not all of them, I think you'll succeed in life. And I think that's what we're after. So that's how I think I would probably frame it up. And you know, sometimes it's intentional, those conversations, and sometimes it just sort of happens through the interactions that we have day to day and practice to practice.
Well, that's great, because those are applicable in all aspects of our lives. I think when you're talking to kids in sports and they maybe have tunnel vision about their sport, which seems to happen a lot these days. You see individuals who have set a goal, and it's great, but they don't look at the expansive nature of what these lessons are, that you can apply them across different aspects of their lives. And so I heard a few parallels, or at least what seemed to be parallels for you and values that you have employed for yourself and that you share with others. Would you say, or would you be able to speak to drawing those same parallels throughout your professional career? Are those the same characteristics that lead to the kind of career that you've had?
I'd like to think that if you walked around the campus at Nike, I hope people would describe, he's a man of character and integrity, right? And oh, by the way, that he's consistent. And so, yes. Was he curious? Yes. I think people would say that. I ask a lot of questions. And so I hope they would say it. You know, I got a little bit of an edge, but I hope they'd say within that edge, he does have some humility. So yeah, I think, you know, what I just described of what I try to instill in others. Yeah, maybe it is in sort of self-reflection now that you asked the question. Maybe it's just me talking to myself, right? And sometimes that's how life is. The things that are important to us are the things that we try to share with others. So yeah, I think that's a great observation on your part in terms of drawing the parallels. No question that as I went through that list, Yeah, I'm that guy. Character and integrity, I teach that. Being curious, I teach that. Humility, I teach that. Not only myself, but having a plan, right? And so, yeah, I think that's a great observation, no question.
You mentioned the edge. I find that there can be that balance of trying to figure out. Okay, I've got you. You're an athlete. You have that DNA. It's already in you, right? So
Yeah,
that DNA of being an athlete, where the edge, the competitiveness, the desire to win, all of those things coupled with the other values that you mentioned. How do you balance that? How do you take that edginess that you want to compete, and you're going to show up every day and you're going to give it 100%, and balance that against the empathy and the humility that you just mentioned, because that's not an easy thing to do. If you're an athlete, that's not easy.
It's not easy. So here's what I would say. I think for us to get ahead in life, our EQ, our emotional intelligence, is as important as that drive and that competitive edge that you talk about. And if you can combine the two, I think that's when it gets special. So if someone has the competitive edge, the drive, the desire, the commitment, the dedication to be successful, to win, and they have the emotional intelligence to walk into a room and go, okay, I've got to read the room. I've got to have a feel for that room to know that I've got to dial up and down that competitive edge. I've got to know when to do it and how to do it. And so I think that that EQ, that emotional intelligence, is probably as important as that sort of competitive edge. And if you can get the two to work together, I think that's when it gets real special. So I think how I'd answer that question is that it is important, but you got to have the EQ, and you got to know when to dial it up, dial it down. You got to be aware. You got to be considerate. You got to be thoughtful. You got to read the room and know when and how to play that, because it can't be 100% all the time. Bam, 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 bam. Especially in the business world, especially in life.
Yeah.
So, and you can't win every time. Shit, I'll tell you this. I used to sometimes I'd pick fights just to lose, so that people thought, oh shit, he does lose fights every once in a while, right? Or debates. I shouldn't say fight, debates.
Right.
And like literally that would be, I would intentionally lose just publicly so that it, oh wait. So, but that goes back to the EQ piece.
Yeah.
The emotional intelligence is critical.
Yeah, that is amazing. You just gave someone the secret sauce, E. That is some really good analysis of that combination, because we look at everyone who's performed at an exceptional level, at an elite level. They have mastered that balance. They understand it very well. Well, some, I should say. There are others who have been just kind of, more of the rogue direction, but those that have balanced it, we see them. They're on full display.
You look at Michael Jordan. You can say what you want to say about him. Everybody, I would guess a lot of people on this call watched that The Last Dance, and no one had more of a competitive desire than he had. But what he also knew is that he was a part of the team. He learned it. If you watched it, he learned it over time to be a part of the team. And I got to get Rodman in the game right away. I'll let him get the rebound just so he feels like he's in the game. I got to get Paxson to shoot. That's being a great leader and a performer. Both requires knowing that, I've got to know when and how to share the spotlight. And I think that's what he did exceptionally well, and why he was so successful, and the Bulls ultimately were so successful. So there's a great example there, in the sports world.
Speaking of sports, just kind of a really question that's not maybe in alignment with everything we're talking about, but I'm curious, who of the athletes that you've met over those 32 years, I'm sure you met a laundry list of athletes that we all admire and that we all look up to. Who's had an impression on you? Who did you have a conversation with or an encounter with that kind of left you thinking, well, that's a compelling individual?
Well, one would be Michael Jordan. I was fortunate in my career. He'd be the one that I'd probably work the most with. Because I was more always on the commercial side of the business versus the product. And at Nike, the folks that are on the product side and sports marketing are the ones that work more closely with the athletes and have the day-to-day relationship. So, but I would say Michael, and part of it was because I grew up in Nike while he was, a great athlete. But what I respect the most about him is the transition that he made from that career to now being an incredibly successful businessman. And he, watching him in a room, the questions that he asks, he comes prepared, he knows his business. And I have a lot of respect and appreciation for individuals that come prepared, that ask the questions, and he does just that. And oh, by the way, he's competitive still at the business table. He challenges you. And I got a story around that one that I'm not sure if I'll share, but if we have time. But anyway, he's competitive. So I'd say him. The other one that and again, maybe it was just because of the time at which I was at Nike, and he was early in my career, would be Bo Jackson. Not only respect him for the type of athlete that he is, but for the human being that he is as well. And I've been fortunate to spend some time with him. He's got a great sense of humor, a love of life that I respect, passions. I really respect individuals that have passions for things, and he is an incredibly passionate outdoorsman. And so he'd be another one that I would throw up there as someone that I'd look to as having a lot of fun. And then again, I'm showing my age here, but I'd probably throw Barkley in there too, just because I've been around him a few times in Vegas, and he's a lot of fun. All right.
I can only imagine.
He's a great storyteller. And again, I think another person that you have to respect for the transition that he made from the court to his new career, right? And he does it exceptionally well. And what I love best about him, and here's another word that I would throw out there, he's authentic. All three of those individuals are authentic to who they are. They're not trying to be someone else. I mean, watch Charles. You watch him on TV. Yeah. He's Charles. He's not trying to be Orlando or Elliott. He's Charles, right? And same thing with Bo. So huge respect for those individuals that are comfortable and confident in who they are, and they remain true and authentic to who they are. And I think that's maybe a big part of why I respect them.
Oh, that's beautiful. And authenticity is a currency in today's world. There's no doubt about it. It's what we're looking for and what we want to see from each other. So as we approach kind of the end of our time together, I want to ask you a question regarding an open letter that you wrote to your daughter, Peyton. That was phenomenal. From a father to a daughter, encouraging her to take on the world on her own terms and to really go after it. That was just, it was inspiring to see. But it created in me, being a father myself of one college age daughter and some middle schoolers, to think, how do you balance family and being there and being a father with building a career and your dedication to your craft? How do you manage that? Because I know family is important to you, as you mentioned earlier. So any thoughts that you can share?
Sure. Age 40, young kids, career taking off at Nike, struggling with how to balance it all. Even looking up going, gosh, can I do that work above me and have all that I want to have, which I'll get to in a moment. By chance, a gentleman gave me a book, which I read. I'm not a big reader, but somehow this book grabbed me, and there's a bunch of stories in it. And basically, here's the gist of it. It's Halftime is the name of the book. It's a little Christian-y. So, again, but the point of it is, we play the first half of our lives. It's about acquisition, acquiring family, cars, house, kids, job, money, whatever. And then we come into halftime of our lives, and it's time then to make, in any sports, the metaphor, the analogy is you make adjustments for the second half. And how do you want to play the second half? And so to answer your question specifically, I'm reading this book, and basically it challenged me to take time for myself and self-reflect. And what I had realized, Orlando, is I had spent my entire career building business plans for businesses I was running and never had a business plan for my life. I took 2 days off of work, personal time off. I went away. I left the house, left the kids behind. I went to a place that I can help think. And basically, I created a really simple mission statement for myself. And it is to to lead a balanced, keyword, balanced and fulfilling life. And then I went back and says, what gives me balance and what gives me fulfillment? I created a grid. It's so typical me, but I have a one pager that I carried the rest of my career. So another 16 years, I carried this with me. It's family, it's friends, it's my own health, and then it's self-development. And then within each of those, I committed to family, and we all have family and friends that are this big. I said, no, not everybody. It's these family members. It's these friends, right? It's these activities. And then I committed to each one of them. What does that mean? So family, for example, and my dad he didn't coach me. I will coach it and be involved with my kids' sports. I'm going to be home for dinner. I won't be home for breakfast because I'm an early bird. I'll be at the office, but I'll call you in the morning. And I could keep going, but I literally put explicit commitments down to whom and what I will do. And then I sat with my administrative assistant and said, now we're going to build this in my calendar. And we literally, so it was one of those moments where it hit me that it's not only having a vision of how you want to lead your life and where you want to spend your time, but then it's the commitment to put it into practice, which she would now block me at 5:30 or 6 every day so I could get home for dinner, right? I will go to PTA classes. She would sit with my wife and know when all the PTA meetings were, or the parent teacher conferences, because my dad didn't come. And my mom couldn't come because she was teaching. And so I would do parent teacher conferences and she would get them built into my calendar and I wouldn't travel. So net is, and I think the learning for those on the call here is, just as you have a vision for the business that you're leading, have a vision for your life, whether it's a mission statement, whether it's who you want to be committed to and what are you going to commit to them, and put it on paper. Because when you put it on paper, it becomes real. And then once you got it on paper, put it into practice. So that's my how I did it. And I wasn't perfect. There'd be those moments when stuff would get out of whack. I'd lean more toward Nike and I'd have to. So again, there was no perfection in it, but there was always a constant commitment, an awareness, a thoughtfulness to it. I'd tell you that. So that's, I think, the best thing that I ever did in my career probably was without question were those 2 days I spent thinking about my own commitments.
Absolutely phenomenal, E. Thank you for that. I think with that level of insight that you have just delivered, you were talking to me as well as everyone else on the call. I'm sure that was invaluable. So I'll close with one final question. What would be your closing advice or inspiration for those in their career that are still building, still developing? What would you say to them before we go?
Without sounding cliche, I do think you have to find what it is you're passionate about. I'd start there. And again, whether it's a company, whether it's a purpose, you have to find what you're passionate about. And I happen to be passionate about sports and sneakers, and that's why I ended up at Nike, right? Number one. Number two, once you find what you're and it happened to be Nike, I was fortunate that the values of the company that I went to work for lined up with my own personal values. So I would challenge you to find a place where your own personal values line up with those values, because I think it endears you more emotionally or pulls you in more emotionally to the company. So I was fortunate with that. I would say, I keep coming back to continual learning. I think would be the third thing I would say. Challenge yourself to never be complacent, to always be putting tools in your toolbox. I think that helped me along the way. A commitment to pay it forward. We've talked about that. And then because I just spoke to it, I think balance would be probably the fifth thing that I would add to that, is to find that balance that allows you to gain the energy that you need to gain when you need it, to be better at home, to be better at the office, to be better in the community, to be a better friend. And so that balance, I think, is critically important. So those would be probably the five things that I would say to those on this call. And I would probably end with just for everyone that took the time. I appreciate you making the time to be on this call, and I wish everyone on this call huge success, good health, and endless happiness.
E, I can't thank you enough, my friend, for all of the wisdom, all of the insight, and for one of the most valuable commodities we have, time. So thank you so much, my friend. I wish you all the best future success to you and your family in your quasi partial retirement as you move forward in your career. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I appreciate it. And I appreciate you having me. And again, all of you, huge success and happiness and good health. Cheers.
Thank you.
All right.
Bye.
Take care. Bye-bye.